Welcome back to Red Cedar Radar. I am here with another installment of our preview episodes for football season. Today I'm joined by Scott Greene, the publisher of Terrapin Sports Report, which is the Maryland version of Spartans Illustrated for the Rivals Network. How are you today, Scott?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am doing well. Thanks for asking. And thanks for being on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Scott and I are going to break down kind of Maryland's last game against UConn and look ahead to their matchup against Michigan State. Go offense, defense, season outlook overall, and kind of make some game predictions for the game that's coming up on this Saturday. I'd say let's jump right in. So Maryland had quite the showing against UConn last weekend. Maryland scored 50 points to UConn's 7, and it seemed like they had a fairly good showing. I heard lots of good things about the quarterback and kind of good points overall from the coach after the game. He seemed pleased with the score, how everybody played. There was maybe an injury, some collisions to the head that didn't sound great. He had some points about that post game, but kind of walk me through Maryland's first game and talk about what went right and what maybe needs to be cleaned up before kind of early Big Ten play begins.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it starts with the quarterback play. Obviously coming off of 4 years of Leah Tungavailoa, left school is the Big Ten's all-time leader in passing yards. And, Billy's a guy who came in last year and would kind of be this goal line, almost like a fullback under center type deal. Um, but hadn't really seen much with him as far as throwing the ball. And when he did throw the ball last year, he's got a strong enough arm. He can make the throws, put the ball in some tight windows, but he wasn't necessarily the most accurate. So I have to say, I think a lot of people were surprised with what they saw from him. He showed that not only can he make the throw, he can fit the ball in tight windows and he can do it pretty accurately. So I think he definitely opened some eyes. The other thing about Edwards that fans from other teams might not really know, but with Tungavailoa, he was a talented kid. There's no doubt about that, but he definitely had some nerves in big games, and it definitely showed. I mean, he threw some big pick sixes and some really important games and stuff like that. But when with Billy Edwards in there, you never kind of get the sense that he has those types of nerves. He just seems much more, I'd say, calm and under control. And I think that's one thing that was kind of missing from the quarterback position last year. That while he might not necessarily have all the arm talent that Tagovailoa has, I feel like between the ears, he's a guy that might be able to get some things done that they weren't able to do last year.
And I feel like sometimes that's an overlooked quality when people are thinking about quarterbacks. They want a guy who can sling the ball far and, make flashy plays. But in the moments when it really matters, the guy that's going to think it through and make the smart plays, I think really does make more of a difference. So that's exciting. So obviously, lots of things went right for Maryland against UConn. Anything that you saw that you didn't like from that matchup?
I mean, honestly, I'm just going to be honest. Followed UConn a little bit over the years, especially because Randy Edsall came from there and then went back there. And I'm just going to be honest, there's not a whole lot of talent in that program right now. So, personally, I'm not taking a whole lot away from it. Obviously, you want to see your guys play well, even if, it's the talent level is down level. You want to see them, do what they're supposed to do against a team that they're superior to, which they did. But as far as getting ready for Big Ten play, I'm just being honest. I don't know. There's a whole lot I take away from that one. The one thing I will say is, I'd like to see the run game maybe get going a little better, and that's even sort of nitpicking. I mean, when you look at redshirt freshman Nolan Ray, 48-yard touchdown his first carry of the season. And Hemby had 66 yards, 4.7 average. So I don't know that you can really complain too much about much of anything. Defensively, I thought they looked good. They had a shutout for most of the game. Maybe a little more pressure on the quarterback. That's something they're definitely gonna have to do. But I'm pretty confident that the guys in the front seven will get pressure this year. But yeah, honestly, there's just not a whole lot to complain about from that game.
Any opinion at all? This is kind of deviating from our plan, but any opinion at all about having a Big Ten game this early in the season? Do you like it? Do you not like it? I guess, what do you think about it?
I don't know. Looking at it from a perspective of, say, a Maryland fan, I think it's kind of a good thing. You know, when you look at Maryland's schedules most years, I feel like in recent years it's kind of four cupcakes, and then move on to Big Ten play, or three cupcakes when the. But I think when you have a new group like this, yeah, you want them to have a couple easy games, kind of get acclimated and used to things. But personally, I kind of like this matchup at this point in the season. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into this last about this later, but I don't really love Michigan State this year, so I'm not sure. It's not like they're facing Ohio State or Oregon or anything like that. But I do like that. It's a Big Ten opponent. You're getting into conference play. It gets you kind of a little more focused early on the season. So personally, I think for Maryland in this particular season, I think it's kind of a good thing. I kind of changes from year to year. I feel like, but I feel like for this team this year, I like this matchup in this spot.
Yeah, a game at home for Maryland against, like you said, a new Michigan State team that's still figuring things out. It might be good for them. You know, kind of using it as a stepping stone into kind of those harder games that are probably coming down the road. As a Michigan State fan, or I guess someone that covers Michigan State, I'll be curious to see if Jonathan Smith can put something together on the road. It'll be a good test. Uh, our first game, their first game didn't go fabulously, so we'll see kind of what happens on the road. So I'll be curious to see how it goes as well. And I think it's interesting to have it this early just because it gives you something to kind of look back on as the season goes, more of an equally matched opponent as you're going forward. And I don't know, I think it'll give some insights into how this team and Maryland might be for the rest of the season. Anything else as far as the first game at all that you want to talk about?
Not really. I mean, I will say the one other thing is kind of jumped out to me a little bit was the punter. He was pretty good.
Okay.
I didn't really know much about him, but I thought he
Mhm.
was impressive. And special teams once you get into conference play are important. So
Yeah.
I think that can definitely play a role as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's jump right into the offensive breakdown. You already talked about Billy Edwards Jr. And his performance in that first game. Any other players to watch on offense that you have?
Yeah, I mean, after Edwards, the first guy I got to talk about is probably Roman Hemby. The running back, he's the third year now as a starter. Didn't have a great year last year. Over 1,000 yards, well, just under 1,000 yards rushing, well over 1,000 yards total yardage as a freshman. But I think he's really got a chip on his shoulder this year. I thought he ran really hard in that first game. I think he's got something to prove, and he's got the talent. And I think he's really someone who's they need to have a big year, and I think he's going to have a big year. I think the running back room isn't quite as uh, it's not quite as packed as it was last year. They lost a couple guys, but honestly, I think that's good for him. I think the more touches he gets, the better he'll be. So he's definitely someone you got to look out for. And actually, right behind him, mentioned him a minute ago, but you got redshirt freshman Nolan Ray. He's a guy that the staff has just raved about all spring, all fall camp. Got injured last year, so basically really didn't play much. I basically didn't play at all last year because of the injury. Like I said, I mean, first touch, 48-yard touchdown. And like I said, all they've talked about is speed, speed, speed. He's got it, his vision. So, it seems like they've got a pretty good 1-2 punch there with Hemby and Ray. And then obviously, you got to talk about the receiver position, Ty Felton. He's a guy had 178 yards last week against UConn. Uh, he was solid last year. He was definitely one of their top two or three receivers, but definitely had some issues as far as focus goes. The occasional drop, but he was razor sharp against UConn. 7 catches, 170 yards, 2 TDs, and it seems like him and Edwards are already totally on the same page. So I think that's huge. And then the guy that I like on the outside, Caden Prather, he's a West Virginia transfer from Maryland. But he's a guy that I noticed a lot of pro scouts really like. He's got speed on the outside. Knows how to high point the ball. Really stretches the field for the offense. So I think those are kind of the main guys you got to talk about on offense.
Do you have any predictions at all at how Maryland's offense will match up against Michigan State's defense?
Yeah, I mean, well, Michigan State. I mean, you pretty much know year in year out. Their front seven is going to be solid. You know that going in. So I think they're going to try and establish the run, but again, I think it'll be how they kind of mix things. Um, I thought last week I thought they really did a great job of kind of mixing things up, especially early on with the play calling. Um, Josh Gaddis, he's an excellent play caller, and when he's hot, I mean, he's as good as anybody. And I think if they can get a good mix going, establish the run, um, I think they'll be in good shape. But the biggest thing is just they've got to be able to establish a run against what's going to be a far superior front seven to what they saw last week.
Anything else you want to say about the offense before we jump into defense?
No, I think that's about it. I will be interested. One thing I will be interested to see, and we didn't see it really at all last week. Is last year, the year before, they've really did an excellent job of getting the tight ends involved. And they lost some guys at the position. Didn't really see them getting involved much at all last week, but I suspect that with conference play here and again with them Michigan State having a much stronger front seven, we're probably going to see some more of the tight ends this week.
Okay. All right. Something to look out for. Okay, so jumping into defense, again, go ahead and list me off some players to watch and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the defense, linebacker, Ruben Hippolyte, he's a you know fifth year senior now, I guess. He's a guy who was highly touted coming out of high school. Had offers from Alabama, programs like that. I believe he was their second leading tackler last season, so I guess the leading returning tackler, I believe, from last year. And he's had his ups and downs throughout his career, but I think this is his team. This is his year, and he kind of showed it in week one. He looked pretty good. Got his first career interception against the Huskies last week, and I think he's poised to have a huge year. I think he's going to have a big game against the Spartans on Saturday. And next to him, you've got Caleb Wheatland. He's a guy who didn't see quite as many snaps last season. They had Jayshon Barham, who's at Michigan now, who was a big part of that linebacking group. He's gone, and I think with him gone, you're going to see Wheatland. As a guy who sees a ton of snaps, really gets after the quarterback. He led the team in pressures last week. They didn't get any sacks, but I think he's someone you really got to watch out for getting after the quarterback. In that front seven. And then at nose tackle, Jordan Phillips, he's just he's a big body and a big time talent. He's a guy that I know pro scouts really like. Obviously not going to see a ton of stats from someone like that, but, he can really disrupt things up front and, he's a big part of what they're going to do. And then in the secondary, obviously Dante Trader, he's a guy who played lacrosse and football a couple years ago. Was a big part of that, safety tandem last year with Bo Braid is now with the Ravens. But, next to him, they've got Glenn Miller now, who was kind of their nickel guy last season, would play some corner, some safety. But he's starting now in Bo Braid's spot. And he looked about as good as you could hope for last week. He had a team high 6 tackles, had an interception last week, and honestly, he looks like a pro. He stepped right in there and honestly looked about as good as you could expect. Replacing a guy who's now in the NFL. So I think those are the 4 guys you really got to look out for, and I think we're gonna. There wasn't a whole lot of stat wise last week because UConn really couldn't do much. But I think you're going to see some of these guys have some big games stat wise this week.
So, going off that, same as my question with offense, any idea or prediction about how Maryland's defense will match up against Michigan State's offense?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll probably see them try and bring some more pressure this week. Um, I think defensively they were probably intentionally not trying to show a whole lot. Just knowing what they were going to do with them. I think, I think we'll see them bring a little more pressure. I think you might see some additional rotation in the secondary this week. But I just feel like, again, that's why I said, against UConn, they're a far inferior opponent. And I think it was just kind of one of those things where once you got a big lead, it's just getting guys in who might not play much and just trying not to show much. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure that
Usually, yeah.
I'm not sure we're
Go
gonna
ahead.
see
Sorry.
anything, totally like what we saw last week.
Yeah. Usually when I'm asking these questions, we're deep in Big Ten season, so we have a lot of,
Right,
prior
right.
games and similar opponents to go off of. But that, I mean, I think that gives a good picture of maybe the things that they'll change from the last game. So taking a step back, maybe from this Michigan State matchup, talk to me about your Maryland season outlook overall.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what they've done under Loxley so far, three straight winning seasons now, three straight bowl wins. Obviously all the talk was them losing Tagovailoa. But I think the talent is there. I think they've done a really good job of building depth, over the last few years. And I really feel like the talent's there. They should be able to win 6, 7 games at least again this year and hopefully get another bowl win. I think for them to take the next step is basically they're going to have to go out there and prove that they can beat a ranked Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, someone like that. They've come close the last couple of years, but they just can't get over that hump. And I feel like just kind of what the program came from before Loxley got here, it's going to take something like that to get them to the next step of where they want to be. And the talent's there. So it might just come down to, the right team on the right day and just getting lucky. I don't know, but I think they should have another winning record. I think that's going to be doable. Um, Honestly, when I look at this schedule now that we've kind of gotten the season started, I mean, 9 wins isn't out of the realm of possibility. I don't think. Maybe not totally realistic, but it looks doable to me. So, we'll see. But again, I think as far as fans are concerned, for it to be considered a success as far as taking the next step, I think they got to beat a ranked team this year. So, they're going to get Oregon. They're going to get Oregon on the road. They're going to get, I think USC at home in October is going to be a great opportunity. So, we'll see. We'll see what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at what Loxley has done is a good stepping stone for maybe exactly what you said, getting to those bigger teams and maybe getting a big win. I feel like I felt that the last couple seasons with Maryland, like watching them play is exciting and they're almost there. Was it, correct me if I'm wrong, was it last year again? Did they play Michigan and have a pretty good showing? Or am I mixing
It's
that
fun.
up?
It's funny. I was thinking about that too. I can't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago where it was
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
road. So I guess it would have been 2 years ago, I believe.
Okay. Okay. I remember watching it and being like, well, maybe this is the time that,
Right.
Maryland steps it up. But yeah, that was an exciting game to watch. I remember that. So I think, I mean, thinking of that trajectory and then Michigan State starting out where they are, it makes me curious to see how long Jonathan Smith will have to build his program up to get to the point of beating those bigger teams like Loxley has done. So that's interesting to talk about because I will hope that that's a trajectory that Michigan State will take as they continue to build, this new program. Any thoughts at all about Jonathan Smith and that hire for Michigan State from like a very outside perspective from you?
I mean, not really at this point.
Yeah,
It's
that's
so
fine. Yeah,
it's
no
so
problem.
early. You're just trying to learn
Mhm.
learn your own team at this point.
Mhm.
I mean, I'll say this. I mean, Michigan State's a program where you go back. I mean, they've had a ton of success. I'll be honest. I thought when Maryland came into the Big Ten, I thought Michigan State, as far as football and basketball goes, was kind of a program that they should be kind of trying to emulate, just as far as the success they had had.
Mhm.
And you look back. They've had some great coaches over here. They've had guys like Nick Saban, and I mean they've
Yeah.
had some great coaches. So I think it and the other thing too is they I don't want to get too much into all this, but
It's
they've
okay.
had some off the field stuff that's been pretty heavy,
Yeah.
similar
Yeah.
to like Maryland's had over the last few years. And
Mhm.
I think having seen it firsthand, from inside
Mhm.
at Maryland, it takes a long time to recover from some of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some fans will just say, oh, 3 winning seasons, bowl wins against, teams that aren't that. But when you look at
Mhm.
how far they've come and where they were after these,
Yeah.
scandals, basically, they've
Mhm.
come a long way. So
Yeah.
it takes a lot to build it back up. But when
Mhm.
I look at a program like Michigan State and the success they've had in the past, and just being in the Big Ten, I think they'll get back there eventually. But I can just tell you from watching it at Maryland, it's going to take time.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so moving on to Michigan State's matchup against Maryland. It will be at 3:30 on Saturday and you can watch it on Big 10 Network. Do you have an official prediction on how the game will go?
I mean, I haven't given enough thought quite yet to have an official prediction. But I mean, just kind of looking at the last couple of years, what I saw week one from both teams.
Mhm.
um I feel like I do think Maryland's gonna have some struggles next week. I think coming off the high of UConn, they're just gonna find that this opponent's likely is just much better. So I could
Yeah.
see them possibly having some early struggles. With that said, I just think Maryland's got the better team right now. It's at home.
Mhm.
They should have a good crowd there. And then they just have the confidence of having beaten them the last couple of years. And I
Yeah.
think when you factor all those things into it, being at home, having some success, and having the confidence of knowing they've beaten the last couple of years, I think Maryland's probably going to come out of this with a win. Like I said, I don't think it's going to be anything like last week. I think it's going to be
Mhm.
close. I think,
Yeah.
like I said, if they don't establish the run, they could be in trouble. Defensively, they're going to have to get some pressure. And like I said, they weren't really able to get after the quarterback last week, but again, they didn't really have to. So I think those are the two main keys. I think they're going to have to, be able to run the ball, create pressure with the defense up front. And if they can do those two things, I think they should come away with a win. As far as a score prediction, I'll say 27-13.
Okay. Okay.
I like Maryland. I like Maryland to win 27-13.
Okay, yeah. Okay. All right, you heard it here first. No, I'm just kidding. um That really concludes kind of all my questions, and that was a really great breakdown into Maryland, kind of looking ahead to the game on Saturday. Anything else, just in general, that you want to share about Maryland, their season, or anything going forward?
I mean, just if any fans are planning on coming, one thing I've found is that, one, DC being a lot of transients in this area, you do find that there are a lot of alums from all the different schools, which is kind of
Mm-hmm.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but I've also found, just talking to people, throughout the years, since we're in the Big Ten, it seems like visiting fans really just enjoy getting to come to the DC area.
Mm-hmm.
So I find it interesting to see, they'll come and they'll tailgate and hang out, go to the game Saturday, but folks will stick around, come in early, go to the Smithsonian, go walk the National
Mm-hmm.
Mall, things like that. So it's a fun area.
Yeah.
There's certainly plenty of bars and stuff to get into after the game if you win. You know what I mean? But
Right.
yeah, it's a fun area and it's a good time. So it's a good spot. I think the Big Ten, it was a good idea to bring in someone like Maryland. You got to have representation on the coast these days. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
now with, you got Maryland and Rutgers on one coast, you got the LA schools on the
Mm-hmm.
other. I think it's going to be fun for fans getting to do all this traveling.
Yeah. Absolutely. One last question since you brought that up. Something I've been thinking about a little bit is what's your thought, opinion, I guess, on how traveling back and forth from coast to coast will affect teams as they're kind of getting used to this new Big Ten? Any thoughts on that at all?
I mean, yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, I'm just gonna. Some people are probably kill me for this one, but with NIL and them almost basically being pros now, I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
just got to suck it up and deal with it. And having these teams on the left coast is the reason they're getting all this money. So
Mm-hmm.
you just kind of learn to deal with it. I mean, with that said, um, the way they have it set up now, by adding Oregon and Washington, I don't think the travel will be too bad. You'll basically
Yeah.
have one, maybe two, maybe one West Coast trip a year, or
Yeah.
maybe two. So is it the way it's set up with four teams out there? I think it won't be as bad. The thing you
Mm-hmm.
do worry about though is for the non-revenue sports.
Yeah.
These guys, and depending on how many games some of these teams play, having to go out there 3, 4, 5 times a season,
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
So for them, I really wonder. As far as football and basketball, I don't think it's that big of an issue. But
Yeah.
you do start to wonder about the non-revenues kids, and
Mm-hmm.
then it could kind of get a bit daunting. So
Yeah.
we'll
I
see.
thought
But
about that a lot. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think as far
I'm
as the
curious
fans, though,
if
I think it'll be cool to get to experience these different
oh,
places like Eugene and LA
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
Seattle.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe go, what do they call it out in Washington? Not tailgating, but sailgating on the water right
Yeah, but
outside the stadium.
yep,
Try our
you
hand
got
at
it.
that. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I've thought a lot about the non-revenue sports too, and I'll be curious about that as well. But I just was curious because you have an even farther perspective, kind of from those schools than we do, and we're pretty far ourselves. But anything else that you want to share before we end our episode? I think this was a great preview, Scott. Thank you so much for
That's
joining.
about, that's about all I got right now.
All right. All right. Well, um, tune in and watch Michigan State take on Maryland. Like I said, 3:30 on Big Ten Network on Saturday. I will be back next week with another preview of Red Cedar Radar. And consider subscribing to Spartans Illustrated and check out Terrapin Sports Report. I'll have everything linked down below, Scott's socials and Terrapin Sports Report socials, so you can check them out as well. See you next week.